I'd like to tell you a story, and the story is going to make sense once it's done. There is a moral to this, and there's a reason I'm telling this story, but let me just tell the story, and then you'll see why. We were on a recent project where we were traveling. It was a job where we had to travel, and we were coming back and flying Southwest, as I normally do, and I was carrying with me a Ronin gimbal in a Pelican type case. It wasn't actually a Pelican case, but it's that kind of case, like a hard shell case. And I have it at the airport, and it's sitting there, and I'm about to get on the plane. They call my number, or my group of numbers, and one of the attendant type people at the gate comes up to me and says, "Is that your case?" I say, "Yeah, that's my case." She says, "Oh, I don't think that's going to fit. That's too big for the overhead." I said, "Oh, really? I always travel with it. It's never been a problem before." And she says, "Yeah, it's too big. You're not going to be able to take that on the plane. You're going to have to check it." And I said, "Oh, well, okay. I mean, it's not a problem. It's a hard case. I can check it if I need to, but it's really weird that this has never been an issue before." She said, "Oh yeah, way too big. Too big." I said, "Okay, well, let's go check it." Because she pointed even at the little measurement area where they can take the size and dimensions of it and know whether it's too big or not. And so I say, "Okay, well, let's just go over there and check and see." And I set it down, and I kid you not, it is almost perfectly the size of the thing. I will give her credit. It was slightly bigger, but when we say it's slightly bigger, I'm literally like a centimeter on each side, like very, very small. It was the right height. It was just a little bit too wide, like a centimeter on each side. Essentially, if anyone was looking at, anyone with common sense would look at it and say, "Oh, that's the exact same size as the thing you're supposed to take on." And I say, "Oh, that looks like the right size to me. Is that not okay?" And she says, "Yeah, it's too big." I say, "Really? Like that's too big? It's the size of the square that it's supposed to be. How is that too big?" And she says, "Well, they're not going to let you put it up top. It's too big." And I say, "What are you talking about?" And there's like all these people there waiting to get on the plane. And the way Southwest works is the earlier you are on the plane, the better seat you get. I don't know if you know that, but that's how Southwest works. It's first come, first serve for seats. And because we fly so much, I've got pretty good, A-list, whatever, so I can go get on a nice seat. And so all these people keep boarding the plane, and I'm having this conversation with this lady. One of her friends, who is another one of the clerks, looks at it and says, "Yeah, you're going to have to check that." And I say, Are you seeing what I'm seeing? That is like the size of the square. Yes, on a technical level, it is slightly bigger. But when I'm talking about slightly bigger, I mean like you'd have to get down there and measure it with a tape measure to actually confirm that it's bigger. And they say, "No, you have to check it. They're not going to let you." And they keep saying they're not going to let you. And I say, "What do you mean they're not? They let me do it all the time. When I go on these planes, like no one has ever said anything. I don't know why this is an issue." And it quickly became apparent to me that the first lady who had made the case that, "Oh, it's too big," she didn't want to be proven wrong. And it's not like I was trying to prove her wrong. I was just showing her like, "Hey, look, it's the same size." And what I would expect from any kind of rational person is you'd go over there and you'd say, "Oh, silly me. It looked too big, but no, that's perfectly fine. You can take that on." But because she didn't want to be wrong, because she insisted that it was too big, and then looked at it and, "Oh, well, she's got to dig her heels in now, right? She's got to dig her heels in." And it quickly became apparent like she was fighting a fight that was pointless. And then I'm fighting a fight that's pointless because I've traveled with this thing a million times before, never been a problem before. And now it's an issue where we're like having this conflict over the size of a case that is the right size. Like if there were a case made to those specifications, it would have been this case. And it just got me thinking, like, when you say something or when you state the case, your opinion, right, what you think is right, you have to be willing to admit when you're wrong, right? And maybe I need to take that in my own advice. But ultimately, when I got on the plane, they didn't say anything, so I put it in the overhead, and it was fine. No one made me check it. I would have checked it if they'd asked me to, but they didn't. But in any case, back to my point, because there is a point to all this. It's that when you state something and you say whatever, and someone else proves that you're wrong Or common sense says that like, oh, you are wrong when you just look at it and you analyze the situation. You have to be able to back out, because what quickly happens is it becomes a conflict. It becomes drama for no real good reason other than you just don't want to be wrong, right? And I definitely need this advice for myself, but I think a lot of people, especially in creative, subjective fields where we're talking about like your opinion versus my opinion, there are times where things are objectively right, and you can look at it and you can say, no, I am right 100%. I have proof. Here's my proof. And you lay it out. And that other person has to be willing to say, okay, I accept that proof. Sorry, my bad. I was wrong. No big deal. And you have to be able to do the same. If someone else proves that you're wrong or just shows you that, hey, you might want to think about this a different way, you have to be willing to accept that and look at it and say, okay, yeah, oh, you're right. Silly me. Wasn't that big of a deal. Sorry I made it such a big deal. And this happens more frequently than not. And maybe you've done it or you know someone that's done it. It's just not healthy to stick to beliefs just because you said it. Like this lady in the airport, she just thought it was too big. She didn't know. She just looked at it and said, I think that's too big. And then we go test it and it's like the same size. And she says, no, it's still too big. For whatever reason, sticking with her original thought that like it was too big when it's not. There were plenty of, actually, funny enough, we got on the plane and there was some guy who couldn't fit his bag in the overhead because it was too big, right? There are clearly cases where, yes, it's too big, it will not fit, we need to check it. But there's other times where you look at it and you say, oh, I was wrong, my bad. So, silly story, it all ended up being fine, not a big deal, but definitely important advice that I always need to keep in mind is because you never want to stick to something for no reason. Have proof, have evidence, whatever it might be. But if someone comes along and shows you a better way or shows you that you're right or wrong, whatever it might be, you have to be able to be the bigger person and say, I was wrong. And you know what? Most of the time, when you admit you're wrong, people don't care. They only care like I care in this case, where this lady kept claiming that it was too big when it obviously wasn't. In fact, I wanted to ask everyone in the airport like if it was too big or not, because what you need to think at the end of the day is like in this situation, and it applies to other situations as well, is that, okay, if that's, is this case too big to fit, right? Is this case too big? If you ask that to somebody, that person has to immediately think, okay, I have to analyze this based on if that were my case. Because, yeah, I might say like, oh, screw you, guy, it's too big. But what would you want if you were in that situation, right? Do unto others how you would have them do unto you, or whatever the whole saying is. You have to analyze it as if it were you in that situation, how you would want someone to treat you. And I guarantee you, everyone in that airport, if they looked at that case and they thought, well, if that were my case, I would say it's the right size. And the lady who was working there, it's that diffusion of responsibility thing. There's a psychology thing where when you have rules and a boss who's telling you to do something, you can kind of diffuse that responsibility onto them and say, well, it's not my rules, it's the airline's rules, or my boss says I didn't have to do it. It's actually a pretty disturbing psychological effect that can happen to human beings, because it's kind of what a lot of the Nazis said after World War II, when they were being tried for these war crimes. They were saying, oh, I was just taking orders. I was just following directions. So that's a total side note. I don't know why I'm going into it, but it is an interesting fact of human psychology that we are very easily swayed and convinced by authority in terms of putting the blame on them, even when they're not there, and you could just look at it common sense. Another story that happened. Why not? Let's just keep going. I went to the Apple store to buy the DJI Phantom 4 when that came out. And I bought it with my boss's credit card because it's for the company. And when I bought it online with the Apple store, as you do, and you can go pick it up. And it was on my account, but it was with his card. And I anticipated in advance that that was going to be a problem because it was his name, but I was the one picking it up. And so I took a picture of his credit card, of his photo ID, and I also took a picture of us together while he's holding up his photo ID and his credit card. And I did that because I'm like, they're probably going to give me crap for going in there and it's not my credit card. And sure enough, I go in there and I say, hey, I'm here to pick up this thing. Here's the stuff. And the girl there says, oh, well, do you have, I need proof of the credit card or whatever. And I say, oh, well, I don't have the credit card, but I have a picture of it. I have a picture of the ID, and I got a picture of us together holding the ID and the credit card. And she looks at this stuff, and I can see the light bulb in her head go off like, okay, he's clearly the right guy who's supposed to be picking this up. He has all the evidence here. And she still says, like, no, sorry, that's not good enough. You need actual proof. And I understand why they need actual proof. And it was just, he was busy, didn't have time to go pick it up. I needed to pick it up. So I say, okay, well, can I talk to a manager? And she says, well, that's the rules. The rules are the rules. You're not going to be able to get away with this or whatever. And I say, okay. And I understand maybe I'm a master forger and I'm really good at Photoshop and I'm getting this all worked out and I have the numbers and I stole his identity and all this stuff. And so I eventually talk to the manager and I see the light bulb go off in his head and he looks at it and he goes, you're probably the one who's supposed to pick this up, but I still can't let you have it. I'm like, oh, come on. Like, just, he's like, well, that's the rules, man. We can't let you get around it. And so eventually we got it all sorted out through a couple phone calls and getting additional proof to validate that I was the guy who was able to pick it up. And it took a lot of extra effort that I didn't anticipate initially, but it's just that thing of like when there is someone else's rules and someone else is the authority, that person is just following orders, they're gonna stick to that. And you can't be that way as a creative, as someone who has their own personal subjective feelings, thoughts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, when you're going into things, because it just makes conflict and it makes problems. Now, the people at the Apple store, they were nice because I saw that light bulb go off and they were like, common sense is kicking in. You're probably the one. So they were really cool with working through the process and figuring out other methods of validation to get that all confirmed. But the lady at Southwest, she just wasn't having it. So I don't know. It ended up not being a problem at all. I don't know why it was so much drama for her. I mean, it's not like, is she paying the fuel costs and stuff? And then is she the one dealing with the overheads? Like, I don't know why she cared so much, but she did for whatever reason. And it just made more of an issue than it needed to be. So just definitely keep that in mind next time something like that comes up. Just check and see, okay, am I actually right? Or is this other person right? Because maybe I just need to accept that I'm wrong, admit defeat. It's okay. No one's going to hold it against you. You commit when you're wrong. Just say you're sorry and move on. It's not a big deal. But just keep that in mind next time you're out on a project or editing something or whatever it might be.